Welcome back to the generic crafting tutorial series. In this bonus video, I'm going to go through and I'm going to reevaluate some of the things inside of my vendor, and I'm also going to go ahead and move my timers to the game mode instead of having them on the vendors and on the objects themselves. So we're going to show you how we're going to do that in this video. So the first thing I want to do is go through my vendor and kind of clean that up a little bit. There's a lot of things in here I'm not actually going to be using. So first of all, total refresh, I'm not going to be using that at all, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove it completely. That is a very dangerous thing. We don't need it in our game, and if you do need it for some reason, then you probably have a very specific use case for it. We're also not going to be using the timer at all, so I can go ahead and get rid of that. The timer is going to be in the game mode. So resupply is going to do basically just this resupply logic and make sure we remove the vendor from the save. And I can go ahead and get rid of that event log. I don't need it anymore. And I actually probably won't need this vendor index anymore. We're going to probably reevaluate how we go through and remove it from the save. Just find the item ID and remove it that way. So yeah, I no longer need this timer here. We're going to go ahead and delete that. Check resupply ready. We're not going to be running any of this logic at all. I'll keep it here for now, but we're not going to be running any of this at all. This can get deleted. Okay. And basically what's going to happen, instead of running resupply, what we're going to do here is when we make a change to our vendor, which would be the save vendor data, we're going to say, instead of check resupply ready, we're going to add a tag. Not a gameplay tag though. If I remember how I did this. I think I get tags. Yeah, it's get tags, which is just going to read the actors tags. And I'm just going to add a tag to my actors tags that says needs replen, so replen. And this gets a little bit dicey when you're kind of adding these dynamic tags in here, but this should work out just fine. So I'm just going to add that replen tag and delete that, I guess. That way we're not getting errors. And then when I load the vendor data, if the vendor data, I don't really need this anymore either, this event log here. I'm probably going to get rid of this vendor index altogether. I think it was less than 0, right? So basically, I'm going to make sure that I do this. Instead of doing last replen here, we're going to do that again. We're going to add the tag. Control C, Control V that up here. Because we know that the vendor has not replenished from the last replenishment time. And off of the true here, we don't need to do anything. We won't already have the tag. We're not saving the tag. But when we refresh the vendor, we need to go ahead and clear our tags. So we're going to get our tags again, and we're going to clear them. Because again, we're not using any other tags. We don't have to worry too much about it. If you are using other tags in your vendor, you'll want to remove item and enter in that tag. Let's go ahead and just remove the item just to be safe here. We'll just remove exact replen and not clear it out, just in case we do tags at some other point in the game, or maybe you've done tags in yours. So when we replenish, we just need to remove that replen tag, and then when we save, we need to add that replen tag. And that's going to trigger in the game mode to replenish this vendor. And I think that's all we really need to do here. We're not going to need these check resupply readies anymore. We're just going to load the vendor, and if the vendor already had saved data, we're going to add that tag. And it's more or less going to be the same thing in our gathering node, but let's build out our first timer here in the game mode to handle that first. So in my game mode, we actually haven't done anything at all in here yet, and we're going to go ahead and basically make our timer. So Event begin play is going to call a custom run vendor timers, and you may not want to do it quite this way. I'm sure there's probably a little bit more optimization we could do here. But basically, I'm just going to have two persistent timers in my game mode instead of running like on the vendor. When the vendor needs a resupply, it runs its own timer. On the nodes, when the nodes need a resupply, they run their own timer. Instead of doing all that, I'm going to have one persistent timer on my game mode. And this timer, for me, is just going to loop every hour for the vendor anyway. We're going to promote this to vendor timer. The nodes I'll probably do every 10 minutes. But for the vendor, it's just going to be every hour. Then we're going to need another custom event. Resupply vendors. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get all actors of class with tag. Okay, and that tag is going to be, I always make sure I copy paste my tags. It's going to be replen. And that is going to be vendor. So this does get a little compute heavy. That's why we're only running it every hour. I might have to think on my nodes. Maybe I'll run my nodes every hour or something like that too. Or if you're doing nodes differently, maybe you're doing like a gathering sim or a farming sim, you'll probably not want to do this with your nodes. You'll probably want to keep your nodes pretty much how they are. I think that's probably a little more efficient to keep them how they are instead of getting all actors of class with tag, because you could have thousands and thousands of nodes inside of your game, whereas we're going to have like a couple hundred vendors at most here. So yeah, it's debatable whether this is more efficient than running the timer on each vendor or not, but I think this is just a little bit cleaner in the grand scheme of our whole game. And yeah, what did I call this? Resupply. No. Yes, resupply. Then we're just going to call resupply from our vendor. And that's all we're going to do here, right? So basically every 60 minutes, we are just going to call resupply from our vendor. And resupply from our vendor is just going to fully resupply our vendor every hour. So now we only have one value we need to set. So maybe you want to do this every day, right? You would make your seconds for 24 hours, so on and so forth, right? But we also do need to kind of do a little bit of math here to, if you're doing like game time or something like that. I think 60 is probably just going to be generally fine. We could get UTC now and get our last resupply time. So we would promote this to a variable in here. And plug that in there, and then we would save this somehow in our save game. I'm not too worried about it. I think every hour is just 100% probably going to be fine. We're not doing an MMO here, so we're not having a live service. If you're having a live service, then this will be even more fine, right? It's just going to do it every hour forever. But with a local player game, I think it's probably fine. Maybe they log in for 45 minutes. This doesn't actually trigger. Um, but we could also do like last login time via that UTC if you wanted to. If you really want to get technical with it, you could save your last login time, check your last login time over your current time, and then decide whether or not you're going to go ahead and fully resupply or start running the timer. And you can even use a subtraction like we did in the vendor. You could subtract UTC from save time, get a value out of there, find the difference between what you actually want your timer to be set at and what that value is, and go ahead and set it that way. But I think this is probably just going to be perfectly fine. I don't really want to save a bunch of extra stuff in my game mode, right? Just yet, anyway. If we decide to expand on this later on, or maybe you guys decide you want to really see that in a bonus video, let me know in the comments. Just absolutely spam the comments that you want to see that, and we'll probably make that video. But I think this is probably perfectly fine to just run them every minute and go ahead and get all the actors of class with tag and resupply them. That trims down our vendor by quite a bit, right? We no longer need this. We no longer need this replen timer. We no longer need resupply frequency. We no longer need last replenishment. And we don't actually need this index anymore. We're going to go through in just a second and do that. Just 1 second. I want to read through all this, make sure that we are taking our vendor defaults, loading up, saving, removing the vendor data. So this function is going to have to change. And removing the tag for replen. And when we save the vendor data, so this is anytime pretty much anything happens, we are setting that vendor data, setting the vendor index, saving the game, and doing the replen. And when we are loading the vendor data, I'm just going to go ahead and return the actual vendor data here, and whether or not we found it. Instead of returning an index, then we're going to remove this index, and then that will be fine as well. So this should actually be called try load vendor data. Just one thing real quick, try load vendor data. And that's going to literally try to load it, and then this is going to pull off to a bool. So yeah, that works. So find vendor index. Instead of doing this, let's see what we have in our vendor here. Yes, so we have set vendor data, which is going to be for the save, which no longer needs to return an index. We still need this local index, I guess. But we no longer need to return an index. We're not going to be using that anywhere. We no longer need to return at all, I guess. So if the local index is -1, we're adding the vendor data. If not, we're not going to do anything. We already set the array element. I guess I could move that down if I wanted to. I'm not going to. Find vendor index. This is just going to return valid vendor. So be valid vendor. And instead of find vendor index, we're going to call this load vendor data. And we're going to go ahead and return the array element of this index here. So this still needs to be a local variable. I don't know why it tried to delete itself, but it still needs to be a local variable here for L vendor index, because what we're going to do is we're going to get a copy of that. And we are going to return that here. And that is going to be a Boolean. So valid vendor, if this index is greater than 0, not greater than 0, I'm sorry, greater than or equal to 0, it's going to be a valid vendor. And our output here is going to be info or save data, or whatever you want to return there. And yeah, instead of doing this and this, we're going to see if this was a valid vendor. If it was, we're going to have to flip-flop these. But if it was a valid vendor, we would do this off of false and this off of true. Just flip-flop those. Or you could run a not if you want. Totally up to you what you do there. So we're going to do that, and instead of getting this out here, we're just going to go ahead and pass info straight in. And then off of the true, we're going to do this, and off of the false, we're going to do that. Yep, that looks good. That looks like what I wanted to do. And we don't need to get that out of here either for set vendor data. That's just going to set itself. So that should be fine as well. The only other thing I wanted to do was remove vendor index. Whoops. Move resupply back up here. Or replen. Make sure everything else got removed properly. It looks like it did. And here on remove vendor data, instead of taking in the in index, we're just going to go ahead and find the vendor data again. Using this exact same thing. I guess if you really wanted to, you could save the index and return the index, but I'm just not going to. I'm going to say vendor ID of the type name. It's one less variable I have to save later on. And we're going to create local vendor index again. And instead of doing this off of the remove, we're going to see if this is greater than 0. And if it was, we're going to remove that index. So we don't need to get a copy. Take this down here and remove the index. And we don't need to do anything off of false. And that should be fine. It's going to work about in the same way. We're just not saving index. One less variable to save. One less out here. Your unique ID. And try to save the game. One more thing you could check in your game mode is like if any vendors with this tag exist, something you might want to do if you're, for whatever reason, needing to be heavily optimized. But I think honestly, most people we're probably gonna be doing something like different vendor information daily and things of that nature, which you're gonna have to write a bunch of extra logic for anyway. But I think this is probably just going to be fine. Like, if you wanted to, you could get all actors of tag and see if this is empty. And if this is not empty, you could start the resupply timer. So you would come out here and say is not empty. And if it is not empty, right, start running the resupply timer. But I just don't think I need to do that here. I think this is probably perfectly fine. Um, totally up to you whether or not you want to run that. But now the vendor timer is just going to run every 60 seconds. It's going to get all actors of class, actually not 60 seconds, 600 seconds. Honestly, I'll probably end up making this an hour or two later. That time is going to be totally up to you. I'll probably end up making it 24 hours, honestly. Um, but, 10 minutes is going to be fine. Yeah, I think 60 seconds is probably going to, or 600 seconds is probably going to be more than fine here, right? 10 minutes is more than enough. Even if I added it to an hour, I think an hour would be more than enough. Like I thought, I don't know why I was putting 60 seconds to an hour in my head, but it's seconds, not minutes there. So yeah, we have our vendors here. Let's make sure that they have their stuff. Okay, they have their stuff. And I do want to test it real quick, so we will do this in 60 seconds. So we will start a little timer here. I guess I'll use this video as a timer. We're at 17. I think we started at 17:17 or 17:18, something like that. So I'm gonna get my chicken meals here. I'm gonna buy all my chicken meals. I'm gonna come over to these other vendors and I'm just gonna sell something. I think we have enough time. So I'm just gonna sell a quartz ring to all the rest of these guys. I probably should have added an event log in my game mode there. Right, that would have been helpful. So we're already almost out of time. But that's fine. We'll just sell this to him. We'll come back, make sure that our first vendor is right, properly doesn't have its stuff. And we'll just wait a few more seconds here. Yeah, again, gathering nodes, you could do the same thing. Totally up to you. I think it might actually be better to keep their timers internal. It depends on what you're doing with your game. I'm going to keep mine internal. But if you're doing like a farming sim, then you're going to want to keep them internal. If you're doing like an MMO style where you have a lot of nodes in the world that all need to respawn at the same time or the same time frequency, you might want to do that instead in the game mode. Hey, we got our chicken meals back. So that's good, right? We got our chicken meals back. I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we're just going to exit, and we're going to come back in, and he shouldn't have them yet. This is 40, 43, 45, somewhere around there. And my clock anyway. I'll do some edits, so it won't be quite the same. So it saved, it loaded, and I'm just going to wait a minute, and hopefully that will do what it's supposed to do. But yeah, with these, it really does get a little complicated based on what you're doing, because they all kind of have different respawn timers, right? So I think I am just going to keep these inside of their little nodes. But if you wanted to do them globally in the game mode, it would basically be the exact same thing. You would add a tag to them when you harvest them, and then you would go ahead and use that in the game mode, the tag, to replenish the vendors that need it, or the nodes that need it. I should say nodes. Still hasn't replened yet. Yeah, we're a few seconds early. Just to make sure this guy doesn't have a ring. And again, this is going to be something more reasonable than a minute, right? But, that's fine. We see that it's working, and that is good. That is exactly what we wanted to happen here. So we just kind of cleaned up that vendor logic a little bit. So I'll go through and recap here just real quick so we kind of all are on the same page. Instead of running the resupply timers on each vendor, we're going to run a single resupply timer in our game mode. And our game mode is on event begin play. It's just going to start running this one timer. And this one timer is going to run itself on 600 seconds for 10 minutes, maybe 24 hours. I'll probably end up making it an hour. And when that timer ticks, when it loops through every hour or every 10 minutes, it's going to call resupply vendors. Resupply vendors is going to get all actors of class with tag. The class is vendors, the tag is replen. It's going to run them through a for each and resupply all of them. Now inside of our vendor, when we begin play, we are just trying to load the vendor data. When we try to load the vendor data, we switch this around a little bit so that we're just getting out the valid vendor and the info. So if the vendor is valid, we get the info and set the info, and then we also set the replen timer, because the only way that we add the tag replen, which is going to trigger that replen timer, because the only way that we have valid vendor data, a valid vendor save, is if this hasn't replened yet. We'll get to that in a second. And that's going to just set all that previous data. And off of the false here, we're going to do our vendor defaults, which is just the default data. So when we save the vendor data, which happens pretty much anytime we change anything inside of our vendor, we are setting the vendor data in the save game custom. And that is just adding it to the array. And we are adding this replen tag. That way the vendor has the tag it needs to replen. And that's for like during game, so like we traded with the vendor and then a minute later it replened. That's because we added it during the game. If you only add it up here, it's not going to work quite right. It's only going to work pretty much off of begin play. And then on resupply, when we actually resupply the vendor from the game mode, we do the logic to resupply them. We remove the vendor data from the save just by using the unique ID now. And then we remove that tag from the vendor. So, right, much cleaner here, a lot simpler, I think, anyway, in the logic. One more thing I'm going to do is just remove that last replen timer from the struct. We no longer need it, but that is all I'm going to do here. Yeah, we no longer need this last replen timer. Yeah, that sucks. Oh, there we go. So if you accidentally delete that for some reason, you could just go to Windows Structure. But yeah, I'm going to delete that last replen time. That shouldn't break anything. It should be fine. If it does break anything, we'll just fix it. But it doesn't look like it broke anything, since we're no longer using that. Right, so now we're good. We've got our stuff in here. We've fixed up our vendor a little bit. Again, if you wanted to do that with the gathering nodes, that would kind of be the similar logic. But I think since my gathering nodes are all kind of going to have different timers, or I should say different respawn times and things of that nature, I think gathering node is probably fine as it is. Otherwise, I'm going to be looping through thousands and thousands of gathering nodes to see if they actually have the tag attached to them. So thanks for watching. Hope you like these bonus videos. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns about the system, make sure you let me know down in the comments section below so I can try to make yet another bonus video for them. If you're enjoying the videos so far, I urge you to join our Patreon. For just $3 a month, you'll get access to all of the videos in this series as soon as I create them. Always available on Patreon, always free, and ready to go. You'll also get a copy of the example project so you can follow along step by step with a real visual guide in the project.